which further alienated the Sunnis, of course, also, and made it easier to point fingers at him and say, this is a bad guy. This is a guy that's sectarian. Now, I'm going to have no love lost for Nur al-Maliki. He's corrupt to the bone, but there's a lot of people out there in politics that are corrupt. A lot. So, but the reality is we teed Iraq up with our actions for what has happened. And just real quickly about Maliki. I want to ask, what has Maliki and the Shia government that's so terrible that you can compare it with Saddam? Or for that matter, so terrible that you can compare it to Al-Qaeda? There's no doubt there have been some bad actors, and the militias are running wild right now. But we're not talking about genocidal activities. We're not talking about torture centers, rape centers, people being sold into slavery. Right? This is who the other side is. So when you look at Iraq right now and you say, well, who's supporting ISIS? And you say, well, hey, it brings a question to your mind that we won't get into right now here, but not to make kind of pop culture illusion here, but I want you all to think, this reminds me of Time to Kill by John Grisham, the movie. I want you to close your eyes for a minute here and think about, I'm not asking you to close your eyes, but just metaphorically. If you looked at the Sunni and you looked at the Shia, and all of a sudden you saw South Africa. And the Sunnis were the whites, and the Shias were the blacks, and the Kurds were the blacks. Would you look at the situation a little differently? Because that's the way it was. Of course, once again, not a perfect analogy. But the Shia and the Kurds, not only did the Sunni-supported Ba'athist government of Iraq allow for genocide against the Shia and the Sunni and the Kurds, this is what we've had. We have an alienated minority that once ruled and will now not, unfortunately, in significant part, I won't say in large part, but in significant part, will not accept a Shia rule. In many ways, and I've heard it spoken by my people that I interacted with in Iraq, and especially when I went to Jordan and saw all the good Ba'athists that had fled, when the U.S. invaded in the aftermath. And they say they're the Safawi. Now, the Safawi are the Iranians. So in the mind, and we're not going as far as Al-Qaeda and call them apostates, right? Murtadeen, Takfirin, we're talking about that these are not real Arabs in their mind. These are Persians because they're Shia just like Iran. So we've got some deep-seated mindset that is the real challenge here. If we do not deny it growth, which we're allowing it to grow now. But what I like, a positive thing that I think we should take away from the Iraq War and from in Afghanistan also, but specifically Iraq, because really we were dealing with Al-Qaeda in Iraq, is that there is an inherent flaw, a Achilles tendon, Achilles weakness to the jihadis. And that is, they are a totalitarian ideology. They believe and act on a very narrow version of Islam, in which they have the al-hudud punishments, chopping people's hands off, people's heads off, stoning people. This is going to alienate the populace, especially when we're talking about mostly foreigners here. Most of the people in ISIS and most of the people in Al-Qaeda in the past, in Iraq, and now in Syria are not native to Iraq. The Iraqis do not blow themselves up. And I'd also like to say that, the Iraqis have courage. I saw them patrol. I saw them put themselves, you can imagine standing out in front of the green zone gates where there had been dozens of car bombs over the years, standing there on security. Imagine the courage it took to do that. With the U.S. soldiers, initially had been there, but then the Iraqis took over the front edge because that's the way it should be. But at the end, I saw them. There's not a lack of courage here. There's a lack of training, and there's a lack of leadership, and there's a lack of support. real quick from just my security director is in Erbil, and he was just outside Mosul with the Kurds, and he's come back, and there's other things if you really dig into it, out there that what really is constituting the force in Iraq that we're opposing now, and the ISIS are the shock troops. It's the neo-Saddamist Ba'athist led by this Saddamist General al-Duri that are the ones that are occupying Mosul, for example. And then you've got tribal support there. So it is much broader based as far as the force is concerned than just the ISIS guys. Now, why do I say that ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Al-Qaeda core, as they say now, going back to bin Laden, these are the same people? First of all, they go back to 9/11. So this is our same enemy. There's been a lot of reports, not, and I won't say it's written in stone here, that Zarqawi was sent by the military leader of Al-Qaeda to Iraq. Abu Musab Zarqawi, who was the one that founded Al-Qaeda. But we could debate that, point. But we cannot debate the fact that in 2004 he declared his bayat to his allegiance to bin Laden. Then once we killed Zarqawi in 2006, there was another leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, but he didn't last very long. Then we have Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the present leader of the Islamic State, the Caliph, self-proclaimed. He was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And to give you an idea, and I'm sure most of us know this anyway, but is that we captured him and we put him in Camp Bucca in South Iraq. And then we released him as part of the Status of Forces Agreement, and on the day we released him, or near thereby, he said, "I'll see you in New York." So this is the threat is real to us. But I think what we have to take an approach here is understanding that we allowed the Arab Spring to spin out of control. To me, it's clear that the Arab Spring is rooted and catalyzed by the Iraq War. For one thing, many of the people involved in the Arab Spring state that the Cedar Revolution in Lebanon was an inspiration for them. And of course, we all know that the reason why the Syrians left Lebanon wasn't because they're good guys. They left because they were afraid we were going to do to them what we did to Saddam in Iraq. It was ongoing at that time in 2005 when the Syrians withdrew, and Lebanon was trying to evolve into a true democracy. Then we have in Tahrir Square posters with Saddam at the noose during the Arab Spring. And the key thing about this, because Al-Qaeda jihadi extremism is an ideology. It's an idea. And we have to defeat that idea. And we were in the process of defeating that idea. And I'll tell you what the evidence is here. If we hark back to the Arab Spring, was there any mention of Al-Qaeda in that? No. When the SEALs killed bin Laden with the Army Night Stalker aviation that nobody ever talks about, when we killed him, was there an uproar in the streets? Did the people take to the streets, Shaheed? Did they? This is, martyr. I mean, that's the greatest thing in Islam, and in Christianity too, the martyr. Was there anybody out there screaming about? Did they take to the streets in Ramallah? Did they take to the streets in Khartoum, in Cairo? No, they weren't even thinking about bin Laden. He become lost in the past. So the current U.S. strategy right now, we'll talk a little bit about that real quickly. First of all, I want to congratulate the President on taking action. My people in Erbil said that ISIS was 15 miles from the capital of Kurdistan. 15 miles. And the Peshmerga had collapsed. So if it weren't for U.S. air power, we'd have a whole different ballgame over there. And you can imagine what they would have done if they I mean, there's tons of Westerners in Erbil, and the Kurds are not their favorite people anyway, and so it would have been terrible. But I congratulate him on that. But, you know, I question where the strategy is here. It seems that we're following the media around instead of the other way around. Now, God bless the war correspondents, I have a lot of respect for them, but that's not the way you're supposed to be. You know, they should be looking where we're going, not we shouldn't be looking where they are. This is a humanitarian crisis, but this is a military conflict, no doubt. You know, we're playing checkers when the game is three-dimensional chess. I mean, the concept that we can contain, which is what seems to be apparent, what we've done is we've divided the battlefield between Iraq and Syria, and it's completely artificial. I mean, I've been on that border. Mine's one of Mars. It's orange sand dunes and nothingness stretching for hundreds of miles. I mean, this is an artificial line drawn by the French and the British in 1917, thereabouts. It's not real. And if we're going to address it and act as if it is real, then we're doomed to a very long campaign. We can't contain these people because they have their Western passport holders. They fight asymmetric warfare. You know, we're talking about terrorism. The impact of terrorism on the United States goes way beyond just the people that are killed and maimed. We cannot divide Syria and Iraq, and we cannot contain the jihadis because they're inspiring and being on the march. And they're going to act. They're going to act soon if we don't address it immediately. I mean, they talk about training the Free Syrian Army and the Iraqi military. You know, that's what we did. You know, we built facilities and we helped train, you know, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi security men. My company and others like me. There's no quest for proposal. There's no movement along those lines. I mean, we're going to count on the Saudis to do the training. I mean, you know, that's what I see as our strategy right now. How can we achieve victory in a rapid period of time? First of all, we have to take a holistic approach to Syria and Iraq. We have to occupy Syria like we did Kosovo. I mean, the easy times are gone. We missed the window in 2011 where we could have rolled Assad, as we would like to say. That's gone. That's gone. So we have to, you know, there's too much violence, too many bad actors, too many separate entities fighting each other in this civil war. But the key and the opportunity here is that the Turks and the Saudis and the Emiratis and the rest of the Arab world wants us to go after al-Assad, wants us to take down Assad. Well, that gives us some leverage if we're willing to take the action, I believe. Now, it takes bold leadership, but I think we can get in exchange for our willingness to take the air campaign full tilt into Syria, set up the safe havens, set up the no-fly zones. Basically, in turn, it'll draw out the Syrians and will destroy their air force, all their military installations, infrastructure. I mean, this is a conventional military. I mean, you know, we know where the targets are. We'd weaken them to the point that they would be almost ineffective. But what we could require from the Turks and a little bit from the Saudis and anybody else in the Muslim world that wants to join in, or for the rest of the world for that matter, ground troops. The Turks have the second largest army in NATO after the United States. And I trained with them when I was a young infantry officer, and they're effective. We could get the Turks to come in and be the main force behind occupying Syria. And the bonus to all this, right, is that we could get at the heart of the issue here. Because Syria, just like Iraq, is the Shia-Sunni divide. A lot of people wouldn't say that the Alawites are Shia, but they're not Sunnis, that's for sure. And their name, means, of course, from Ali, which is, the Shias are Shiat Ali, which are the partisans of Ali. That's where the name Shia comes from, Shiat Ali. It's a break in Islam, basically from after Muhammad's death in the 7th century. We can say to the Saudis, all right, not only are you going to have to participate in this occupation after we destroy the combat effectiveness of Assad, but we got to have ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, the other al-Qaeda affiliate there. They got to go. We've got to make sure that our citizens, through the waqfs, through the charity foundations, are not funding jihadi Islam out there, which is the main source of funds. And the really strong achievement we could bring is we could get the Saudis to tone down the Wahhabi jihadism that they're financing in the madrasas in Pakistan and elsewhere in the Middle East. This is in essence, that's the ideological petri dish from which the whole underpinnings of what jihadi Islam is. You say, wow, that's going to be a hell of a war in Syria. Not that it's not already. And I tell you, it is very hard, and I still am dealing with it, to call for more war. Because not only am I willing to sit here and talk about it, but I'm ready to go. And my company's ready to go. And there are a lot of other people like me that are ready to go. Now, I spent 4 years on the ground in Iraq. I came back and, I had PTSD. I was shot at. Things blew up near me. You're in that kind of environment, and that ever, pervasive sense of fear that becomes part of the environment, and you can't express yourself. You suppress it, and it comes out. It's every soldier, every contractor, I believe, that was in Iraq. I had a debate with George Casey, General George Casey. It was funny at an event. Just me and him. I have a lot of respect for the man. He was wrong, but I have a lot of respect for the man. I said, look, every soldier coming back from the war zone needs to be treated as if they have PTSD, because they do. Every single one of them. Some are more resilient than the others, but this also separates out. There's not the shame, of going, if everybody's treated right. And he said, that's not true. It's not true. And then he started to tell me how he came home, and his wife was going, why are you so angry all the time when he came home? And I'm like, okay, he's a 4-star general, right? He wasn't out on patrol. Okay, he was flying around hell. Sure, do you have fear? No doubt. He's under threat, just to get to the point. So, this is not something that, but I think that for our own national security and for the future of our children and for the West and for the world and for the people of Iraq and the people of Syria and people of China, for that matter. Across we have to address this, and we have to address it rapidly. And I think we can do it with the Turks. Otherwise, we're going to see terrorism rise again. I can't imagine, I truly can't imagine, if 2 years from now, when President Obama steps down as President of the United States, that we will still have a terrorist state in the heartland of the Arab Peninsula on the doorstep of Europe. I just can't imagine it. Thank you.
Well, Carter, thank you for that very comprehensive and insightful presentation. My name is Ralph Winnie. I'm the Director of the China Program at the Eurasia Center and the Vice President of Global Business Development for its Eurasian Business Coalition. I will serve as moderator, and we will start by taking some questions from the audience. Would appreciate it that you do ask a question and you identify yourself so that Carter will be able to accurately address your question. Yes?
Joe Graziano. I'm with AKM Consulting and formerly with the Commission on Wartime Contracting.
Christopher Shays and, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
And I spent some time in Iraq and Afghanistan uniforming as a contractor. What do you envision as the role for U.S. and other foreign contractors in Iraq now? What can we do, and can it be expanded? What do you think should happen?
Well, I think from a training program, I mean, it can't be done without contractors. We need to reconstitute the Iraqi army. I mean, there was a time a few weeks ago when I believed, a few of us could go, we could stand up a brigade of armor and we could go take the crit, just with a few contractors. But I don't know, what I'm reading and hearing is that the Iraqi army has imploded. And they're so concerned about Baghdad that any good troops that are out there, they're not going to pull them away from that. But I think in order to, and then of course there's the reconstruction question out there. I mean, not only are we going to have to rebuild the tomb of Jonah, okay, in Mosul, but we're going to have to rebuild. I mean, I remember my father was a CB in the Navy, construction engineer. He rebuilt the railway from Wade to Nang in the Vietnam War when I was 5 years old. And so I'm coming from a family of builders. I like to see myself as a builder here, not as a destroyer. I remember how upset he was in '75 when they rolled into Saigon and he saw them using one of his bridges he built. Now I know what it's like because ISIS is sleeping in buildings that I built. And now, it's hard for me to comprehend. I mean, it really is. And so we need to, Iraq has money. Of course they're hating that right now with $85 a barrel oil, but they can fund a lot of their own reconstruction. But I think it's going to take an international program of historic scale to rebuild not only Iraq but Syria. Once again, I think we can't do one without the other. Yes, sir.
Charles Sills, Board of Directors, Eurasia Center, Eurasia Business Coalition. Your Turkish strategy, to what extent, if you know, is this shared or being promoted or backed within the Defense Department, the White House, the administration, National Security Council?
All I know is that the Turks, it's evident to everyone, that the Turks are standing on the sideline right now, and they're effective, and we know what they want. Beyond that, I think there's such a resistance to entering into, quote unquote, a new war here by the present administration that it's almost a psychological block for them to think about expanding the conflict. But I'm not saying that they're not considering it, but it seems to me it's right in front of them.
Anyone else?
What would the Russians say about that?
Oh, no question. The Russians not going to be happy about it, but certainly not going to be happy about it. But I think that what directly came out of, in my opinion, and I speak Russian and spent 10 years over there working after I got out of the Army and before I ended up in this, in Iraq, is that what they've done to Crimea. It's almost as if we accepted it. It's not even spoken about anymore. This is huge break in the post-World War II paradigm, in Europe. They've seized a piece of another sovereign nation. In essence, we can talk about what are we going to do for the Kurds, what are we going to do here in this, but the underpinnings, and I would hope to unravel the tapestry, the underpinnings of our security and global international relations system is the nation state. And we've allowed the Russians to seize a chunk of another nation. And I believe that this is rooted in our failure to act in Syria after Assad killed over 1,000 of his own men, 1,000 of his own civilians with chemical weapons. And we did not act at that time. So at that point in time, I think we projected weakness, we created a power vacuum, and Putin seized it. And so, in a way, Ukraine may suffer from this.